Welcome back, everybody. My name is Anurag Das. I'm here with Drake Sasser, and we're going to watch the final round of Swiss for the Modern 10K trial here in Lansing, Michigan. And I got to say, tensions are high, Drake. We've got a lot of very, very well-performing players here. I think looking at the standings right now, there are 12 players in contention for this top 8, and I hear there are a lot of draws. We've got a bunch of X1s playing it. I think our feature match for this round will be Jesse Robkins, who we saw earlier today playing 4-color control. And against Jesse, we have Daryl Patino on Azorius Hammer Time. So we're going to have a pretty spicy match with a lot on the line here. The winner will make the top 8. The loser will be back to play, some Pioneer tomorrow. So it's a win-win either way, but you really want to get those points. You really want to get those prizes. You ready?
Oh, I'm ready, Anurag. This is what you live for. These, high stakes magic. You mentioned there's a lot on the line, especially for a lot of the players we've been following today. Players like Adam, players like Jesse, who are in this NRG series race. They're looking to pick up those top 8s, not just for the money, not just for the glory and the coverage, but for those extremely critical NRG series points that are going to buy them those invites to the NRG championships at the end of the year. So there's so much on the line. There's a lot of players doing well. There's a lot of great magic we've already seen, and I can't wait to watch more. So I could not be more excited.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's good to keep your eye on the prize, the larger picture, which is the championship series. And for this, if you are wondering how to get qualified for the event, you're either winning a showdown, having consistent results over each season, or having consistent results over the year. So there is the at-large spot for overall year-long performance, and that means that every event matters, every match matters, especially the ones that are make or break, that get you in the top 8 to get to the larger number of points to push you ahead, right? So Jesse Robkin, I believe, did win the team event alongside Zoe Riederman, and that means that she's definitely in contention for, with a strong finish here, very much so in contention for a seat at the table come January time or whenever. And looks like the matchup is going to be underway here. Jesse Robkin on 4-color Blink against Daryl Patino on Azorius Hammer. Talk to me a little bit about this matchup. Who do you think is ahead?
So this is interesting, right? When you're talking about the Hammer deck with the Lurrus ban, right? Lurrus was a big part of allowing the Hammer deck to grind. Now, the Hammer deck still has access to some stuff like the reality chip, as here's a great turn 2 answer to a Esper Sentinel. But to wrap up the thoughts, the pitch cards from the 4-color decks, things like Fury, things like Solitude, are huge blowouts against the Hammer deck. But the Hammer deck, does pick up, we saw the power of Lavinia earlier. Lavinia Azorius Renegade against Living End. I think that card could have some potential here as well. Just trying to shut down things like Hushbringers, things to shut down those elementals. If you can contain those huge blowouts, I think you're in a good spot to get underneath the Blink deck. And you're always talking about who the beatdown is. The Hammer deck, definitely the beatdown here as we move to Jesse's turn 3.
Yeah, turn 2, Stoneforge Mystic going to pick up a copy of Colossus Hammer. On the flip side, turn 3, Wooded Foothills going to grab green-white, and then we are going to play maybe Teferi Time Raveler to bounce the Stoneforge Mystic, and this is massive tempo all the way around. Teferi in play seems pretty good from the 4-color side, right?
Yeah, it's not as backbreaking as it is against some of the Cascade decks, right? But it does a lot to shut down things like combat tricks with things like Sigarda's Aid. It also does a lot to just keep random creatures off the table, right? Like we're seeing here. I was mentioning how Daryl's deck is very much trying to get underneath Jessie. We're trying to, really kind of get her dead before she can just start accumulating loads of cards, start snowballing things with Omnath. The typical play patterns we've seen from the 4-color deck across, not just today, but across some of the other modern events as well. This Hammer deck is really looking to get Jesse dead before any of that can really get set up. And with no creatures in play on turn 3 for Daryl, that's not a great start for actually executing that plan. Now, the Hammer deck is known for its ability to grind things like Urza Saga, the cards drawn off things like Puresteel Paladin, Stoneforge Mystic, when replayed, is going to find another equipment. So, we're able to keep up a little bit on card advantage. But the fact of the matter is, your cards are worse than the cards out of the 4-color Blink when it comes to rate. Like you're talking about card advantage, you're talking about overall just generic power level. Your cards are a lower power level, so you need the synergies to convert to a victory before Jesse can overpower you.
Yeah, very interesting. And just as a heads up, for anybody who is not able to see the standings or hasn't yet, I just want to recap. There are 12 players currently in contention for top 8 at an X1-1 or better record. And that means that a lot of X1s will even be playing it out just to make sure that they can secure their spot. There's a lot of Omnath in the top tables, and I wonder what that means for, well, just not only the future of Modern, but like our top 8 and how it's going to shape out. What decks will come out ahead? Other decks that we see, is it Murktide, Grixis Death Shadow? A lot of players that we've also seen earlier today. So we've got Zach Allen, Adam, Wasper and Moses. Looks like the top 2 seeds, in fact, are is it Murktide decks, both at 7-0-1, and then there's also one mono green Tron list actually at 7-0-1 too. So that's kind of exciting.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, this is really what we've seen a lot of today, is a lot of old decks brought back with new tools. And honestly, that's one of the coolest things about the Modern format to me. We've seen Death Shadow, we've seen Mill, we've seen Prowess, we've seen the typical suspects, but things like Tron, Bring Light, Scapeshift, all this stuff, this is really what makes Modern as great as it is. You have this deck diversity, decks that have existed in some form or another across all of Modern that, are reinvigorated with tools from new sets like New Capenna, and, Modern Horizons obviously created a huge shift, but it's nice to see some familiarity in a post-Modern Horizons era where we've seen the addition of a lot of new powerful cards. So, I love Modern a lot. I've played a lot of Modern, and this is really what keeps me coming back again and again as we go to turn 4 for Daryl.
It's kind of funny that we're just like, oh, yes, the voice of reason in this current metagame, and the voice of reason is actually just like mono green Tron, you know what I mean?
Tron!
This is not this is not the timeline that I expected, yeah. Oh,
absolutely.
Man.
Counterspell on that Sigarda's 8, absolutely not. Kind of interested to see that. Maybe suggests that Jesse not too flush with removal spells, as here comes a Colossus Hammer. Remember, the Sigarda's 8 being instant speed doesn't really matter. So if we're worried about something like Colossus Hammer, countering the enabler instead of the Colossus Hammer itself maybe suggests that we're a little low on removal, as Daryl was kind of assembled. I don't want to say, whatever their own version of Tron, but instead actually just a 11/11 creature, which beats down. And no Solitude from Jessie means that she's at 3 and suddenly under the gun to answer all these creatures.
Yeah, that is kind of crazy here. I was expecting maybe one of the Planeswalkers to take the brunt of the attack there, but instead Daryl just says, no, I'm going face here. I'm going to try to end the game ASAP. And I really like that direction here. I mean, the fact that it went through is like you mentioned, it's a clear sign that, we're not sitting on too much removal. Something to think about maybe like post-game is whether or not countering the Sigarda's aid was actually worth it. I mean, with Teferi in play, you're right. There are certain cards that maybe we want to go after, but there's so many tricks that the Hammer deck has available to it that I could totally understand that line. Now, Omnath in play, hopefully able to stabilize the life total.
I think we see a Lightning Bolt. That can take care of the Puresteel Paladin. We can downtick the Wren to take care of the Memnite. And then we have a blocker for Stoneforge, so we can live a turn. Then we get to untap with our Teferi on 3 and bounce the Stoneforge Mystic. And suddenly there's no more lethal threats in play. Now, we do have to hemorrhage a lot of resources, but I mean, look at Jessie's hand, right? She has a pile of expressive iterations. She can afford to throw all these resources away to not die and then rebuild with things like expressive iterations. That's why this 4-color deck is so good. I'll say it again and again. Being able to just spew resources to keep, the board clear, to not die, just like 2-for-1ing yourself left and right with these elementals, and then rebuilding with these card advantage engines like expressive iteration and Omnath are why this deck is so dominant. And so we're going to see if she can kind of juke and jive and navigate the position to work in such a way that the game plays out that way. Now, of course, Daryl still with a very pressing board state. Couple cards in hand, looks like another Stoneforge and another Puresteel Paladin among the mix. That could make things a little complicated for Jessie as she fetches and shocks a Sacred Foundry into play. That will trigger the second ability of Omnath. It's the second land. Makes some mana.
Yeah, those cards that you mentioned in the hand are future Jesse's problem, because right now the board looks pretty terrifying. We do have a couple tools in play. The Teferi on 3 next turn, going to be able to bounce maybe the Hammer or the Stoneforge Mystic. But right now we're trying to figure, and this is kind of interesting because we could have sandbagged the fetch land activation to gain more life. However, Jesse choosing instead to use the mana. Oh, there's a Prismatic Ending. That's a big draw.
That's a huge one to have here, is we're going to dress down that Stoneforge Mystic, and we still have the dress down in play. Looks like we did this on instep. Remember, we ticked up the Teferi. So that means we get to instant speed that Prismatic Ending. So we dressed down on instep. We went ahead and Prismatic Ending did instant speed on our own end step. And then we get to untap. And now Jesse has the bolt for the Puresteel Paladin if at any point, Daryl tries to do any kind of funny business. Now, that's pretty telegraphed, right? Like, you wouldn't fetch and shock at such a precarious life total if you didn't have something. So now we'll see with this Giver of Runes, Stoneforge, looks like Shadowspear is the other card. If any kind of fixture like that Daryl can maybe line up a kill despite the kind of clearly telegraphed lightning bolt. There's a lot of creatures in play that are problematic as we move the Paradise Mantle over. Wonder why we paid mana for that. I think it cost 0 to do, but we did pay mana for that. Lightning Bolt. Oh, no, that was to play the Shadowspear, I think. Yeah, Lightning Bolt going to go ahead and take care of the Puresteel Paladin.
I got to say, I'm pretty impressed with the end step dress down play. Not something that you see very often, but that does demonstrate a very solid understanding of how your cards work and the best way to use them. That dress down is a very good example of how you can actually shut down your opponent's abilities on their turn, while also, combining Teferi Uptake to Prismatic Ending. Just all in all, good Magic, tight mechanical play. Maybe not the most exciting, but I think there's something to say about just knowing what your cards do and not messing up some of the, basic or slightly more complicated interactions that your deck presents.
Just explain that Dress Down was available on Daryl's turn to remind me that Puresteel Paladin does not work on Daryl's own turn. Is that you just did that for me?
Well, now that you say that, I completely missed that, but sure, yeah, I'll take
I appreciate that, Anurag.
Yeah,
I appreciate you very subtly
right.
making me look a lot better by explaining what happened there. Thank you. I appreciate it. Here comes Expressive Iteration.
We're going to see a copy of Expressive Iteration find Counterspell, Prismatic Ending, and another Dress Down. I like taking the Counterspell. I like exiling the Prismatic Ending.
Yeah, the ending's one I think I definitely want for this Giver before that thing's online. Absolutely not. And now Jessie back in the driver's seat. And this is what we're talking about, right? See how she managed to use her resources to live through Daryl's following turn. And then now, despite, kind of expending things in such a way that actually did work out great for her after she made all the mana or whatever, but still, it looked really precarious. And then now we've cast a few Expressive Iterations. And now you're suddenly asking yourself, okay, how do I actually even lose? We're even getting frisky with Omnath, right? You're at 5 life, you're getting frisky with that Omnath. Is there a better show of strength? Steelshaper's Gift the Draw.
It's always a damning sign when the control player is like, you know what? I'm confident enough to attack. That's when you know that, because control players, they never do that, right? You only attack
conservative with their resources. I'm never attacking with this thing. It's a blocker.
Yeah, exactly.
Might as well
right?
defender.
Who knows? Maybe a hasty Ragavan will come down from round 6 or 7 to haunt me in this one or something. I don't know. Got to be prepared for everything, anything at all times. And so when a control player does attack, that means bad. That means real bad.
Yeah, it means you're not doing great. As here's a counter spell. Go ahead and take care of that Stoneforge Mystic. Maybe a Puresteel Paladin follow-up. Equip the nonsense to the Puresteel Paladin. That's a big Puresteel Paladin.
All 3 cards at the same time, just be like, yeah, it's happening.
Yeah, we're just moving all this stuff over. Whatever, I don't know. It's big now. All right, now it's back in my hand. As Jessie draws another card, another copy of Expressive Iteration in Jessie's hand. And like I said, this is one of these times where it really went from back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Then 4-color easily turns the corner with these Expressive Iterations, and suddenly you're asking yourself, okay, how do you even lose from this position? We've down-ticked everything. We can cast the Yorion if we feel like it. I don't know. Here's an Expressive Iteration. Why not? Really kind of what matters here is what I'm asking, right? We know there's another Puresteel Paladin, so I guess we have to find a creature removal spell. But even Yorion can reset the Teferi, so we even have that covered already. So we're just kind of trying to move cards around and secure a victories and make sure we don't get punked out if you're in Jessie's seat from here, I think.
Right. Looks like the second Expressive Iteration is going to put a copy of Ice-Fang Coatl into exile to put back into play. I also think I saw a Boseiju added to the hand here.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that's definitely a good one, right? Especially when you combine it with Renin 6. That is very exciting. And then also there's a Yorion that could just come into play whenever to just reset the whole board and, add more loyalty to Teferi, draw a card off the Omnath and the potential Ice-Fang Coatl. This is the sort of end game that, you aspire for whenever you're playing any sort of control deck. This is complete dominance. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'd like to call it, I think a lot of Magic players really get irked with the combo players and the Storm players for taking game actions, but I would like to postulate that control players are just as guilty of being addicted to game actions as the Storm players. They just take them over multiple turns, so it doesn't get as much flack. What do you think?
As a control player, the only thing I can say is I do not deny this in any capacity whatsoever. You are correct. Guilty.
Guilty. That's what I'm talking about. We deployed another Teferi, tick that one up, attack with Omnath. Here's an Ice-Fang. I don't know. Here's some more Planeswalkers. I have 100,000 cards in hand. The turn's yours.
I like this. This is my kind of timeline.
Yeah, this is exactly up your alley, Anurag. I don't know. Yeah, okay, Daryl's seen enough. All right, I get it. I get the joke. I'm dead. We've seen enough. And Jesse going to be moving up a game here in this, we're joking around here. This is a high stakes match for these players. Jesse, of course, looking for some energy points, another top 8, a lot on the line for her. Of course, Daryl clearly looking for a lot of these things as well. But I would like to, I think the points are worth even a little bit more to Jesse than previously. And after her performance in Minneapolis, where she took home a trophy alongside Zoe Reederman and Zach Allen, this is kind of a tear for her. 7-1 here again, maybe looking at another top 8, up a game here in this, what is almost certainly a win and in situation. I gotta like her position. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting too, because I know, Jesse, prolific content creator, writes a lot of articles, magic-related theory, and has been writing a lot about Underworld Breach. And the fact that she's here today playing this 4-color deck is just a very convincing statement for the power of the deck. I'm curious to take a look at Decklist real quick. We'll talk about sideboarding and things like that, follow up on your insight into this. But looking at the side, okay, here it is. Looking at the Blue-White Hammer sideboard, what are the cards that you like? We see 2 Hushbringers, some Lavinias, Blacksmith Skill, March of Otherworldly Light, Pithing Needle, sort of War and Peace, Relic of Progenitus. Anything catch your eye here?
Well, I'm going to have to read Blacksmith Skills first. Okay, I see that gives Hexproof and Indestructible. Okay, it's going to copy that. So, obviously, the Hushbringers, this is something I talked about at the very beginning. I think those are extremely important for shutting down the blowout cards, Solitude, Fury, these cards that can just be a true disaster for you. For the same reasons, I think you want things like Lavinia. They don't get picked off by Ren, right? Like, you can play these creatures that have 2 toughness or more. They don't die to Ren. You can put hammers on them if you want. They don't get destroyed by things like Force of Vigors and what have you. So these are attractive options for me that are actively good at stopping what's going on the other side of the table without running themselves directly into hate. You can reach for some other stuff like the Spell Pierce and maybe the, like I said, the Blacksmith Skill if you want. I don't know how much of that I'm really interested in, especially when Teferi is part of the mix for the opponent's side of the field. Trying to interact at instant speed seems like it might not be part of the equation for you, but like I said, I don't necessarily know. Daryl is going to be on the play, so maybe you can just take like a little bit more of a tempo approach with those kinds of cards and just really just try to punk out the 4-color player.
Okay. From Jesse's side, let's take a look at her sideboard. We've got Endurance, Yorion, okay, Emrakul, Veil of Summer, Eladamri's Call, Force of Vigor, Supreme Verdict, Chalice of the Void. What are you putting into your deck from the sideboard, and what are you taking out?
Good question. I think the Chalices are really attractive. Chalice on 1 is extremely potent most of the time against the pile of cheap efficient cards in the Azorius Hammer deck. Wouldn't mind those. Force of Vigor is obviously extremely attractive as well. Even something like Supreme Verdict is something I could talk myself into. There's a lot of things like Giver of Runes and stuff like that that I think are worth respecting. And there's a lot of like the clunkier cards in your deck that you're maybe not as interested in. You can probably shave on some of like the less exciting Planeswalkers. Like, this matchup is just not about strict card advantage. Like, you need to maintain some of it, right? We talked earlier when we were talking about sideboarding, don't dilute your deck, right? You still need your core game plan to function. So you still need your pitch cards and you need your card advantage to recoup it. But you don't need to go so hard on card advantage, because I don't think that's what the post-board games of this matchup are going to be about. They're going to be about hateful permanence. So we're talking about, like I said, Chalices, Hushbringers, Lavinias. Like, they're going to be about these hateful permanents that, disrupt each other's game plan. And, Daryl's obviously going to be trying to attack for lethal underneath it. Jesse's going to be trying to stop that from happening around all of these effects. And so the strict card advantage cards aren't as appealing to me. So I can even see shaving on something like Express Federation, right? Just as an example.
Yeah, very interesting. Daryl Patino here. Tournament life on the line in this game. Down a game in the match overall. Turn 1, Esper Sentinel off a shocked Hallowed Fountain. Jesse Robkin on a mulligan to 6 this game. Maybe mulliganing aggressively for the cards that you're talking about. I see a copy of Solitude, potentially Besage You in the hand as well. Pretty good in terms of interaction. What's the follow-up here on turn 2 for Daryl Patino? Let's find out.
Yeah, I mean, Esper Sentinel, one of the more potent turn 1s. Even though we saw it get picked off by Ren, it did draw a card in game 1, right? Like, that's not a bad floor. Like, even though it got picked off by a Planeswalker, left the Planeswalker that's very powerful behind, it still at least drew a card, right? It was at least like a 1-mana draw card. That's not a bad floor for something that was, you could probably say, is as bad as possible. And I think a Stoneforge here, just to use all your mana, is fairly appealing. You could try deploying something like a Sigarda's Aid, and then you have, as you can see, Steelshaper's Gift, plus Hammer on the following turn if you're going to try to just get her dead. But I think that shows a lot of disrespect for any kind of Fury Solitude setups that could potentially be going on. And you can see Daryl asking how many cards in hand. We do see a Solitude among the bunch. So I think if Daryl decides, oh no, there's actually a Hammer already. So we have that option available to us now. We can go for Sigarda's Aid Hammer right now if we want. And it looks like Daryl going to choose to be patient instead, deploy the Stoneforge Mystic, and I think that one's going to have to resolve. No 1-mana Essence Scatters from the 4-color Blink deck.
Design-wise, I think that card would just be fundamentally broken too if you printed a 1-mana counter target creature on the stack. Yeah, I think
just
so.
1 mana counter target creature? You think that's too good?
I would play that in Legacy for sure. Counter Murktides all day. Yeah,
okay,
so I don't know. That's just my thought. But yeah,
I'll take your word for it. I don't know. I mean, what Pyroblast does the same thing. Counters Murktide, blows it up too. I don't know. I actually play like 6 Pyroblasts or whatever, so maybe I'm just a clown.
That card is absolutely goated for sure here. I do like playing the Stoneforge Mystic out here. You did mention the potential line of, playing the Sigarda's Aid out and then, just flashing in Colossus Hammer. Suiting Esper Sentinel up is actually not too bad because then that, anytime your opponent does cast the first non-creature spell, you get to draw a card no matter what, because it's going to say, hey, would you like to play 11 mana, as my Sentinel tax? And
I will decline.
Yeah, I will definitely decline. Yeah.
I'm with you on that. And we did see the reality chip as what was grabbed by Daryl. I wonder if that signals anything to Jesse. Maybe that signals that we're looking to play a card advantage game. Maybe it signals there's already a hammer in Daryl's hand. Grabbing reality chip, I think, really interesting there.
Yeah, I think the pace of the game definitely changes from game 1 to game 2. Post-board games in general slow down just by nature of boarding and more interaction. But here also, I think strategically speaking, your opponent has so many blowout cards, for example, Solitude, for example, Force of Vigor, and it just doesn't make much sense to, play into those spells when you could slow roll and then have a more definite or polished or even just calculated kill, as opposed to the, hey, maybe close my eyes and hope I get there, and then, taking the coin toss.
Right. This is a turn that I think a lot of players could mess up, and I'm interested to see where Daryl goes. We have a potential, I think we can potentially kill here. Do we have 2 hammers? No, we have a hammer. We have a Sigarda's Aid. There's a Sigarda's Aid. Now we're mana. Okay, so we're mana short of the kill because we have to cast Steelshaper's Gift, but now we can just hammer. Interesting. And Jesse can choose to Solitude in response to the trigger. Notably, we might have an Urza Saga we elected not to play. We did. Chose to fetch for a Plains instead. Potentially respecting some Force of Vigor action. And here is a Solitude in response. Pitching a Supreme Verdict and Blacksmith Skill in response. Well, that's pretty good, Anurag.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly the position you want to be in here. That explains exactly why we didn't play the Urza Saga. That's a lot of damage coming in here from the Stoneforge Mystic. And do we actually have an answer here?
Well, if we don't, here could be the answer on top. Here's Abundant Growth.
I did see
Looks like Beseju the pickup. I think that counts. It's not the way you'd like to do it, but I think it counts.
Yeah, for sure. I think
I see a Beseju.
Jesse's
still at 6.
Triple check the Oracle text on Beseju. Is it legendary creatures only or legendary permanents?
What? It's non-basic enchantment or artifact.
Sorry, the cost reduction.
It's legendary creatures, I think, only.
Yeah, it's creatures.
Right?
Yeah. Only creatures. So red and 6 will not decrease the cost on the channel ability there. Paying the full price, 1 and a green, but alive, and that's what's important.
True. Well, maybe grabbing this Shadowspear may be a little premature, because if you have another hammer here, it does play around any kind of Force of Vigor effect, right? Because Jesse has to Force of Vigor if that's what she has. She has to Force of Vigor before you would play a second hammer. So after she does that, you can play the second hammer. So interested to see the Shadowspear grabbed off the Steelshaper's Gift. Now it does play around Beseju too, but the card on your radar I think should be Force of Vigor.
Yeah, second Blacksmith Skill. That's what it is. Blacksmith Skill would be absolutely incredible here. Unfortunately, we don't have it, but we do get to tutor up certain mana. So this card says target permanent gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. This applies not only to creatures, but also to any artifacts like Colossus Hammer or Sigarda's Aid, things like that, which I think is pretty potent. In this matchup, it's basically one of your best cards, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's certainly one of your best responses to things like Solitude, right? Like that's a 2-for-1 that you get for 1 mana, and you still get the damage across. So it's, as we saw, that's exactly the way Daryl wants it to line up, lined up perfectly. And here comes a Shadowspear. It's going to deal 2 damage, gain a little bit of life for Daryl. And we still have access to the reality chip. Now, that's a card we can put into play at instant speed and attach to Stoneforge Mystic on instep. So, potentially you could just flash it in, right? It's an equipment. You can flash that in, equip it, untap, and start going ham. And we are going to see a little instep reality chip action. That plays around the Ren and 6, trying to ever nab it before you can play it and then equip it. Going to bolt the Stoneforge Mystic in response. Now, this is an 0-4. I'm sorry, it does not die to Ren. This thing is huge.
Yeah.
Top card. It's so big. All right, so we're going to make it a 1-5 with Shadowspear. We're still pretty far from killing Jesse with that. Urza's Saga going to go to 2. I don't know why I thought that card was a 1-1. Pair of lands in hand for Daryl. Do we fire up like an Inkmoth or something and equip? Can we even do that? Yeah, and equip, hoping to hit like zeros or something?
I kind of like that. I mean, it would be cool if we could just like spam cards off the top of our deck, feature site style, but like,
I think we need to get these constructs going though, and I think Daryl agrees. So we're just going to pass the turn back, all our mana up, 3 mana on instep. Going to Beseiju the Urza Saga. Yeah, I would like to get a little bit of value out of that, please, before we blow that up. So we're going to go ahead and make a construct, and then we can search for any typed land. So we're looking for Hallowed Fountains, Plains, or Islands in this Azorius setup.
Yeah, sequencing here is kind of tricky. I mean, it's about as good as it's going to get. The board looks somewhat intimidating with Jesse at 4, facing down a reality chip and an Urza Saga token that right now looks like it's just a 2/2, but it might be
a
good
3/3
enough.
with the Inkmoth activation. That could matter a lot here, because otherwise Jesse could threaten to Teferi, bounce the Shadowspear, and then you can't replay it because it's Teferi. And then, oh no, there's still a reality chip. Never mind. It's a 3/3. It could be a 4/4, right? Because reality chip's also an artifact. This card just has a ton of types on it.
I mean, and the Shadowspear also gives +1/+1. So like, you have lethal definitely set up here. It's just a matter of whether or not Jesse actually has an answer. So this will certainly be fascinating. It's very close. It's very, very
close. We can tick up, grab Beseiju, but then we're still worried about reality chip, right? Talking about Ren. Looks like the players are talking to each other about some discrepancy with Ren.
I mean, in theory, you could just tick up, get the Beseiju, and then target the Shadowspear. If Shadowspear equips to the reality chip, if it equips to the construct, though, you just maybe go after the construct in combat.
I think you want to go after whatever is attacking you with the most power in combat, like, because it hits both creatures, right? Oh yeah, bounce the tokens, great. Pick up the Beseiju, then you can hit the reality chip, and then there's just nothing that attacks. Yeah, this is by far the best line, assuming that the Beseiju was returned. I think it was. And is that a hammer? That's a Springleaf Drum. Hammer wouldn't work anyway in combat because we have to Teferi. Nothing really to equip. I guess we can. It's time to fire up the Inkmoth, right? Equip the reality chip. Try to find a creature that has power, not infect.
I mean, I just want to see I just want to see reality chip equipped to something. The concept of what's the creature? What's the type? It's configure, right? That's what that's the keyword.
Yeah, reconfigure. Yeah. I think specifically.
Oh, okay, yeah. That is so sweet, and I don't know. I want to see. I just want to draw some cards. I'm always down. Why not?
I mean, Honorog, I want to draw cards. Master of Accumulated Knowledge. Wow, more than 11, huh? We're gonna go and play land and fetch. Now, Daryl did know the top
F's in the chat for Accumulated Knowledge. Oh, those were good times.
Were they? Did you have fun? I'm glad you enjoyed that. I'm not an Accumulated Knowledge gamer. That card's just obnoxious.
It's close to legal in Pioneer. What, Frantic Inventory or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. Something inventory, I think. And we're gonna look at the top card and concede, and that's gonna do it. Jesse's gonna win 2-0 over Daryl Patino in this Azorius Hammer matchup. You asked me how I think it plays out. This is very much what I foresaw, right? Like, a lot of the Planeswalkers accumulating advantage. Now, we did see that Daryl showed up prepared. He had the blacksmith's skill ready to go for the Solitude, which is, obviously would have been a huge blowout. But even trying to recover post-Solitude, right? Like, Jesse still found a way to navigate with Teferi and Ren and Beseju's, like the other stuff that wasn't the elementals, in order to pick off all of the creatures and still end up winning the game. So I think that is a very indicative of the dominance of the 4-color deck in that matchup, where you're talking about how many things they have to kill artifacts, enchantments, and creatures, right? Like, that's what they're good at. They're great at killing artifacts, enchantments, and creatures.
Absolutely, yeah. I just want to say congratulations on the back-to-back 8-1, likely a very solid record to make top 8 here. If it's not guaranteed, I'd be so surprised. But yeah, that's very good. So first, the win in the team event. Now moving into the top 8 of this event. Very strong showing here for Jesse Robkin. I want to know if we have a backup match available to us for round 9, and I'm hearing that we do, so that'll be excellent to get into. I'm kind of excited. What other decks do you want to see in the top 8? I did see a Grixis deck that you had mentioned you were interested in.
Yeah, I think our backup match here includes an old favorite, one that might have you looking at the calendar to figure out what year we're in. A little bit of Grixis Death Shadow action. We haven't seen that
Okay.
in a while. It seems like the card Solitude has done a lot to maybe make that strategy worse, especially post Lurrus being banned, right? But maybe a little bit of Ledger Shredder action could reinvigorate the
Yeah, I was
archetype.
gonna say, yeah, I counter your Solitude. I touche it with one bird, and hopefully that gets there. But let your Shredder quite fantastic, as we've already seen very many times. This thesis has been proven by many decks and many players in
True.
today's event alone. I mean, we saw so much. So I wouldn't be surprised if that is what has given the deck, just like a breath of fresh air. Because I know, for a period, Death Shadow was just absolutely insane. And then, it sort of fell off the map a little bit. And now, with the Lurrus ban specifically, it just fell off the map a little bit. Now, maybe
Yeah.
returning back to its former glory with Ledger Shredder. I mean, that card seems pretty good, just giving selection, aggression, all the sort of pieces that you want for the pie, the puzzle. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Well,
Looks
let's
like we're
take
going
a
to get
look
into
for
game
sure.
1 pretty soon. Um, Kind of excited to see, who do you think what would the matchup even be? Looks like it's four color. Okay, so Zach Allen on 4-color Blink, who we saw earlier play against Raja Suleiman on blue white. Zach Allen did win that one convincingly in 2 games. Playing against Luke Fuller, Grixis Death Shadow. Yeah, 7-1. So both players need a win to get in here to the top 8. You have to pick an archetype to win this match. Who do you think? Where's your money on?
Listen, Zach Allen, I've known the man a long time, and I have a hard time betting against him. This is, of course, it's really cool to see. This is Jesse Robkin's teammate in the legacy seat when they won in Minneapolis. So, what a run back, what a tear for this team of players. This is what we're talking about. You have these players that are kind of making a bid for the NRG championship at the end of the year, working together, constantly testing and iterating. And look at how potent the result of these players working together is. Just time after time, all these players are showing up in top 8s. These are clearly just very much a cut ahead of a lot of the rest of the pack. And so I'm going to put some my votes for Zach Allen to win this game. Although a turn 1 Ragavan from Luke with no turn 1 answer for Zach Allen, maybe I'll be biting my words already.
Yeah, here it comes. Ragavan going to show. Ooh, Endurance. Okay, that's actually castable this
Endurance.
turn.
No green source in the Grixis deck, so we're not going to be able to play that one right away. Actually, I think
JK.
you would like to if you could, but you can't. So
That was good on you. Drake keeping me in check here. Just sometimes I intentionally say dumb things to make other people look smart. That's a tried and true strategy. Ragavan going to create a treasure token, and we're going to see Ledger Shredder come down.
Oh, what a turn 2 anyway. I mean, enabling Ledger Shredder on turn 2 and being able to trigger it right away off Inquisition. Notably kind of interesting that you have to select the card to discard before seeing the hand. And what a hand from Zach Allen. Pile of lands, pile of planeswalkers. What you want, Luke?
Oh, yeah. Very good. I like taking the Ren and 6 here. It's just the on-curve threat. Teferi doesn't even seem that intimidating. You could bounce Ledger Shredder, but that's not even that great, because, then Teferi dies to the Ragavan. This situation looks somewhat grim for Zach Allen. We're going to have to draw some pretty good spells off the top of our library. I think the saving grace here is that Luke only has 2 cards in hand, and the pressure here isn't completely crazy, but if this Ragavan gets to connect like a couple more times, then yeah, we might just be in trouble.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And of course, that Inquisition, like that mana off Ragavan. I mean, how many times do we have to demonstrate why Ragavan is as good as it is? If there's a reason not to be doing this 4-color blink thing, it has to be Ragavan backed up by things like discard spells and counter spells, like we see from the Murktide strategies, like we're seeing here from the Grixis Dash Shadow strategy. And Grixis Dash Shadow, unlike Murktide, actually gets access to a companion. We see Gigantha the Wellspring over there in the companion zone. So, both players showing up with a little bit of extra help in the companion zone. 2 different companions going head to head. So really cool matchup. I mean, this is kind of like the way I think companions were intended to be done, right? Where you have 2 different decks, 2 different drawbacks, actually some real consideration to the different cards. And so I like that. I think this is going to be a cool matchup, a lot of interaction. And even with Luke pulling ahead early, cards like Supreme Verdict, cards like Fury are just huge potential to swing the matchup back in Zach Allen's favor at basically any point in time, as here comes Teferi Time Raveler.
What do you bounce with the Teferi?
Probably like the Shredder. It's the most mana and has a counter. Yes, like it's gonna be a little bit smaller coming back down, most likely. It doesn't have haste like Ragavan can, and it's the most amount of mana tied up. So none of them are great targets. I'm not gonna lie to you, but I think that just using the most mana is the most attractive thing.
Yeah, fair enough. That makes sense here. Looks like in the hand here for Zach Allen, there's a copy of Solitude, freshly drawn, and a backup Teferi Time Raveler, which we could pitch to cast a Solitude if we really choose to. Really depends on where these creatures are going to be aimed at. I mean, this is a really interesting question, right? So if you are in Luke's seat, do you respect the Solitude? I mean, you did get to Inquisition. You did see an empty hand. Now, if you attack Ragavan to the player, Dragon's Rage Channeler to the Teferi, then Solitude could flash in, keep the Teferi alive for a turn. But Ragavan's the real threat here, maybe. It's convoluted. It's pretty twisted. What do you like doing here?
I think you're not going to get the option because you have to respond to this Thoughtseize. I think you do want to respond to this Thoughtseize. I want to hit the Ragavan, I think. It's the card that's snowballing you the most. Like, you can afford to hemorrhage a little bit of life total. The Ledger Shredder is one of the harder ones to block, but like, I think the Ragavan is the card that's actually pulling Luke ahead, especially as Luke begins to run out of cards. Any big hit off the top, like Expressive Iteration, could just put the nail in the coffin for this game. Whereas for the time being, any kind of like sequence like Expressive Iteration into like Fury, Pitch Cast, or something like that could still get you out. And we do see the Solitude in response. That's going to leave Zach with a hand full of lands. That one's going to hit the Ragavan, as we kind of figured. And it looks like this might just be a 1 mana lose 2 life for Luke Fuller. Here you go. Here's 2 lands.
All right,
I have 4
Zach Allen,
lands.
I'm going to need you to dab on the screen right now. You may be in a very bad position board-wise, but at least you got the value off the Thoughtseize. You feel me? That's something to be happy about.
Is that value? Is that what that is? I don't know if that's how that works.
It's the Thoughtseize bug. Now you're going to draw like a 3, 4, 5 minute spell and you're going to win the game.
Yeah, you go. You just draw Fury and just never didn't have it. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Omnath into Fury. That's the way we drew it up.
Oh, boy.
All right.
Oh, Abundant
Growth. Not a bad one. Very quickly drawn. Didn't get a good look. Going to buy Yorion past the turn back. That Yorion actually looks really good, right? There's 3 Abundant Growths.
That Yorion looks beyond really good. This is what I'm talking about. Like, okay, the companion mechanic, maybe Adam was right. Just need to destroy the mechanic because this is...
Well, I'm going to buy the Giganta, so take that. You bought Yorion, I'll buy Giganta. Let's see who wins in that battle. I think it's Yorion on our...
Thank you for clarifying.
I just wanted to put my vote in ahead of time. It's probably Yorion.
One big reason why I think Zach Allen is still very much so in this game is actually the delirium aspect of Dragon's Rage Channel. It does not look like it's delirious just yet, so the clock is certainly not as significant. Imagine if we were like 4 or 5 life points lower, then I'd be much more frightened. But here it comes, big Sky Noodle, the Bird Serpent, whatever you want to call it. Yorion going to draw 3 cards. It's basically Ancestral Recall.
Ancestral Recall. He's going to leave them the same places. That's pretty gross. And now both of the threats suddenly look really meager compared to the 4/5 flyer that is Yorion Sky Nomad. And, it's such a strange position that these like measly little abundant growths that seem to be kind of not really accomplishing much suddenly converted to 3 cards for Zach as he gets to play a blocker that blocks all these flyers really well as well. This is exactly kind of what I was talking about when it comes to hitting that Ragavan, right? Like, we lost some life in the process. We're down to 8. Okay, oh, woe is me. We can undo that later with an Omnath and a few lands. We need to stop ourselves from getting snowballed by mana and cards by the Ragavan. So now we can, you can deploy Giganta. Good for you. Wait, this one has to attack now?
Uh-oh. That's not good.
Great. Yeah, that's not the way we drew it up. Is that a bolt too?
Oh, it looks like it. I was like, is that a mountain? No, it's actually just lightning bolt. So Yorion going to the graveyard here, but it just seems like we have all the answers. I think we drew a lot of good cards off of the Yorion. I see like an Ice-Fang Coatl. I see a couple copies of Ephemerate maybe, and I also
see Coatl and Ephemerate is gonna be nice.
Yeah,
this Giganta is a lot of mana and real big dumb idiot that runs straight into an Ice-Fang Coatl. Tap land for Zach. Now suddenly these lands look great too, because now Zach's not gonna miss a single land drop, and he just drew a ton of spells off the Yorion. So now suddenly Zach's in the driver's seat.
Kind of crazy how this game just went from like 0 to 100 back to 0, but to 100 in the other direction now, and Yeah, I mean, Yori Unbroken. I'll just say it's been so impressive. I think this is, like you mentioned at the very beginning of the session, top two decks in the format. This and Living End, and everybody here today has demonstrated why Yorion is the deck to consider to
Well,
beat.
if there's a draw step to do it, Luke, that's one of them. Here is Expressive Iteration off the top. Let's see. Gonna decide how to tap. Maybe I don't think it's worth casting Gigant over Expressive, but maybe Luke disagrees. All right. Thumbs up, says Zach Allen. You can have that one. And here's an Ice-Fang Coatl. I wonder if you go ahead and fire off the Ephemerate now, since the shields are down for Luke.
Yeah,
Looks like the
I
answer
quite
is
like
no.
that.
Well, I think Zach might have an Eternal Witness too, which would be also very potent to Ephemerate, and maybe worth being a little bit more patient.
Notably, Death Touch is online for the Ice-Fang Coatl. We have a snow-covered island, forest, and plains. So Giganta probably will not be able to connect here. On top of that, freshly drawn counterspell in the hand here for Zach Allen.
There's the Eternal Witness. That's going to return Yorion. Oh, no. That's disgusting. Here's a tap land. Don't even need to cast it yet. But Yorion, Flicker, Eternal Witness, Ice-Fang, and 3 Abundant Growths. That's pretty good, Anurag. That's just pretty good. And we drew the counterspell off of the Ice-Fang to go ahead and hit the Expressive Iteration. And I can't get a great look at the last card, but oh, there's an Emrakul too. Zach, are you serious? Is this in the main deck?
Wouldn't be surprised. I mean, if you're targeting the mirror match, for example, then yeah, Emrakul seems very good here. That being said, this game went from being
Yeah, it's in the main deck. I guess you can grab with Eladomri's Call. Wow. Zach just with all of the power here. And here's an Omnath too to go with the bunch. Luke looking at one card in hand. Zach looking at a bunch of cards in hand. Luke has seen enough. I don't even want to see your Emrakul other. I don't care. We're picking them up. We're done.
It's actually kind of funny because with all these fetch lands in play that we Abundant Growth, we could actually trigger Omnath multiple times that turn, gain more life, get more mana, replay the Yorion, draw more cards. Gruesome, absolutely gross. And I think I have to wonder what would happen, because it just seemed like we had the perfect start here from the Grixis side of things. Luke had a very aggressive start. There was nothing in hand. So what went wrong? What's your analysis of the situation?
So when you're talking about who's the beatdown in the matchup, right, it's going to be the Shadow deck. You see this time and time again with these like mid-range style, tempo style setups. Things like Is It Murktide, things like Grixis Shadow, you're going to approach the matchup very similarly. And so the Ragavan decks, we're going to call them, are going to try to get under the 4-color decks because the 4-color decks have a big top end. They have a lot of these Omnath stuff, this Yorion stuff. I mean, it looks very mana intensive, right? Eternal Witness, 3 mana. Yorion, 5 mana. Omnath, 4 mana. Like, these cards are extremely expensive. A lot of the card advantage baked into these other decks is baked into Expressive Iteration. So what happened here is, Grixis Shadow tried to appropriately take its role, tried to get on the board, bunch of creatures, try to get Zach dead, but the 4-color deck doesn't really care that much about its life total. You see it time and time again. It feels like these decks get really, really close, and then we see Jesse stabilize from 4. We saw Zach stabilize from like 8. It just doesn't matter. They're willing to give on their life total, and then just to set up their board for one big push, like a Yorion that draws 3 cards. Now I have a blocker and 3 additional cards, and they just kind of like try to shoot like really clunky spells in the meantime. Basically, you just cast your spells that are like a little clunky, take some damage in the process, but then you have one big turn where you completely flip the script, and suddenly you're in the driver's seat, and the advantage is snowballing, usually involving Omnath.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's take a look at some sideboards here. We've seen Zach Allen's already, so I want to take a moment to take a look at Luke Fuller's Grixis Death Shadow sideboard here. And just a friendly reminder, if you are tuning in just now, please, please, please support the channel, hit the follow button, show the NRG team your support. All right, sideboard, I see a couple Torox, the Giganta, Flusterstorm Spell Pierce, Kolagon's Command, Mystical Dispute, Engineered Explosives, Alpine Moon Dress Down, and a couple unlicensed hearses. Put the thinking cap on, Drake. What are we bringing in?
Well, I've played a little bit of this matchup pre the Luris ban, and I tell you what, those Torox cannot get in the deck faster. That is what it's there for. Protection from white, super attractive against the Solitude Prismatic Ending deck. Also being able to be worth, 2 cards. It does him to Torok, ha ha ha, get the joke, with the kicker on cast. And of course, you want to reach for some of the other card advantage stuff, things like your, I'm sorry, not card advantage, some of your other cheap interaction, things like Mystical Dispute. And, you might even reach for some of your dress downs. They're really good with your shadows, and they're really good at answering solitudes, being able to just stifle the sugared ability to keep you from getting blown out with your shadows and stuff like that. You maybe can touch some of the spell pierce stuff too. I wouldn't actually reach for the Kolaghan's commands too much. Those are there for the hammer deck. They look like they're good in a lot of fair matchups, but the nature of the 4-color deck, you exile a lot of your threats. So you can't use the Raise Dead mode on Kolaghan's command as much, and that severely hampers the ability of that card to be potent in this matchup.
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting analysis there. Yeah, I wonder if Ledger Shredder changes the equation a bit, but we'll find out in the post-board game. Let's take a look at Zach Allen's list perhaps and see, just as a reminder, what's in the sideboard here, because it looks like there's a fresh number of tools between Chalice of the Void, Supreme Verdict. I see Veil of Summer, Flusterstorm, Obsidian Charma, that's a cool one, Fury, Knight of Autumn, and Endurance. What are the best cards? It feels like there's so much to bring in this matchup.
Yeah, I don't like the Chalices as much in this matchup. It seems like it would be appealing against a Shadow deck, but really, they have a lot of 2-mana spells that can play around it. Things like Cruxa that are already really good in the matchup that Chalice just doesn't really affect. And also, it shuts down some of your potent tools as well. Really, the worst card in your deck, I think, for Zach is probably something like the Emrakul, maybe like some of these like bolts can go or whatever. So but you do want a lot of your like prismatic endings, right? You do want some of those other effects. And I think you want your Veil of Summers. So like you want all those cards to work, and I don't want the Chalices. So I think I just kind of want the Veils and the Supreme Verdicts. I think this matchup's supposed to be on paper good for Zach to begin with. So I don't want to overboard here. So I want to reach for things, like I said, like the Veil of Summers, like the Supreme Verdicts, especially you need Supreme Verdict to take care of Torok. That's not a surprise card. That shouldn't be surprising Zach Allen. He's probably should have played enough with and against Grixis Shadow during its time to know that card's on the radar. So I expect Verdicts to come in. I expect Veils to stay where they are. I'm sorry, to come in as well. But most of the rest of the sideboard I expect to kind of stay where it's at.
All right. Well, let's jump into game 2 here for our time-shifted matches. Both players are vying for that top 8 slot. Zach Allen at 6-1-1 with 4-color blink up a game in the match against Grixis Death Shadow. Luke Fuller at 7-1. A lot on the line here. Let me see what.
Remember, this is the last round of Swiss. So, the winner of this match looking pretty good on top 8 prospects. We did just see Jessie Robkin pick up her winning in and maybe a repeat performance as far as top 8s go here at Energy Lansing. And Zach Allen, teammate of Jessie Robkin, looking to do the same. Already up a game against Grixis Death Shadows. Here's a turn 1 Dragon's Rage Channeler.
All right, Dragon's Rage Channeler. Not necessarily Ragavan levels of scary, but it does give you a lot of early filtration, which is valuable for sure.
For sure. And also sets up Delirium really fast, too. So, like, it maybe turns Dragon's Rage Channeler into, potentially a 3-3 on turn 2, right? But we did leave the card on top, did not put it in the graveyard. So that means it has to be good enough to be not worth, some additional damage. Didn't get a great look. Tap Breeding Pool for Zach Allen.
Like okay, no turn 1 removal here is actually kind of interesting. I don't necessarily know if that means that we don't have removal. Maybe it just means that the Dragon's Rage Channeler isn't threatening enough to shock and use removal on.
Right. I think that's very much the case, right? Like, if the Dragon's Rage Channeler is not even online as far as Delirium yet, and it's not attacking for 3, then shocking is actually probably worth more damage. Like, you're taking more damage shocking to kill it than you are then you're saving by just killing it aggressively, and maybe letting Luke have the additional, filtration is not really worth spewing off a removal that could maybe tag something like a Ragavan. I like the patience from Zach. This is what I was talking about and how he navigated the game in game 1, where he took a lot of early damage, let kind of Luke just do his thing more or less, appearing to be from behind, and then flip the script with a huge Yorion. So I think this is very much kind of the same formula, where you're just going to kind of take a few points from Dragon's Rage Channeler. I don't know, here's a expressive iteration. This one, I think our land drops already been played. So if we don't find Mishra's Bauble, this might just be an anticipate in order to maybe enable Delirium. Land looks like expressive iteration to hand. Land's going to exile. Wait, is this turn 3? Yeah, this is turn 3. I'm sorry, land was not played. We just fetched is the joke. So we did play our land. Expressive iteration in hand. Spell Pierce up. I kind of like Luke's spot, even though we're only attacking for 1 with Dragon's Rage Channeler.
Yeah, that is a question I wanted to ask you, right? So you're sort of saying, Zach Allen kind of looking like a genius here for being patient. I think there's a very old adage. I think I heard LSV once say, like, if I could play with Ancestral Recall in any format, I'd be willing to pay almost up to 19 life to draw those 3 extra cards. And obviously, 2022, different year, different time, different setting, but just goes to show you how life is very much so a resource that you can use. So taking the damage from the Dragon's Waste Channeler, not that big a deal here, but what about the Surveil? I feel like the selection does add up over time for Dragon's Waste Channeler. Is that something that you would be nervous about letting your opponent have unfiltered access to?
It's not nothing, but you have to understand kind of Zach's context when he's evaluating the surveils, right? Because like it depends on what your role is in the matchup. When you're talking about the potency of this 4-color deck is here, we're going for this expressive iteration. Luke very quickly going to try to fire off a fetch land and a spell pierce most likely. Yeah, it's worth a lot less when you're not really concerned about the power level of the cards drawn by Grixis Death Shadow. This speaks to the average power level. This is going to be kind of hard to really articulate in a meaningful way for everyone to understand. But the average card in Zach Allen's deck is worth more card advantage wise than Luke's deck. So the filtration doesn't matter as much because even the best card of 3 that Luke's gonna have access to looks like a Torok that is kicked, and wow, it is. That's a good one. I'm saying all this about how Zach's cards are better, and then here comes Luke with a card that's worth at least 3 cards on rate and can't get Solitude.
Oh, no, this is triggering back bad memories. No, him to Torok.
Not a him to Torok fan, are you, Honorog?
Re-rolling on 6s when you only have 5 cards. Bad memories, bad suppress. Oh, goodness. Okay, love it. Yeah, look at that discarding a land. Do you see how powerful that is? What the?
Yeah, Eternal Witness plus land discarded. And if there's not another land for Zach to cast like some of this Omnath or Teferi stuff, we're in a lot of trouble. Beseju counting some colors. Let's see. Can we make it all? We can. Here's Omnath. Going to quickly draw a card here. And now there's Delirium. This Unholy Heat can quickly take care of this Omnath and begin to lay the beat down. There's even a Death Shadow for Luke and a Ragavan among the bunch. It looked like just everything coming up, Luke, here. This Torok certainly did a huge number on Zach's hand. Zach already under the gun by what's in play, and more options available for Luke beyond that. Hard to hate Luke's spot from here.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, Torok also synergizes pretty well with discard. I wonder if we're going to see any of that too. I'm not sure if there's a copy in the hand here, but any card that gets discarded will put. I mean, discarding a card puts a counter on the Torok, right? So
even cycling and channeling, so you can look out for that too. If Zach cycles a Triome or channels a land, that does trigger the Torok as well. And here comes the expressive iteration, trigger that Dragon's Rage Channeler. And this is really, did we just leave it on top? Did we know it?
It's so good. We know that it's a good card anyways. We want it anyways. It's all good.
Yeah, I'll just keep it. I'll take another expressive iteration too. Look at expressive iteration, just doing what it does best, finding other copies of expressive iteration.
The most broken card I think that's been printed in recent Magic, expressive iteration. Good early, good mid, good late, good early, good mid, good late. Why?
And
why is it so good?
And elected not to cast it.
Oh yeah. Looks
like we're choosing to hold up Drown in the lock instead.
I like that. That's, play a bit more slowly. You have you're dictating the tempo of this game, right? So might as well keep that. There are very few cards that actually get you out of this situation. No reason to give Zach any breathing room because you can just untap and now cast the Thoughtseize and then, get your damage in and things like that.
Terminate the pickup for Luke. That card perhaps representing a lot of respect for Omnath in the matchup. Here comes Thoughtseize. Going to surveil a Ledger Shred to the graveyard. Okay, Thoughtseize you. Do you have a response? There's a Solitude. Could Solitude here. Yep. This is the same play we saw earlier. Solitude in order to make Thoughtseize have no text. I'm going to go ahead and drown that one. No, thank you. I'd like to keep my threats. Should be a surveil trigger there too.
Exactly 5 cards in the graveyard to counter Solitude. Must feel nice.
Yeah, still lost 2 life. Going to go ahead and make some blockers with Sokens and still only 2 power and toughness. Not enough to trade profitably with Torok, but can stifle some of the bleeding, right? And keep you alive for a couple more turns as you desperately draw for your Supreme Verdict. Now, Luke been very patient with Supreme Verdict, right? Supreme Verdict happens, he gets to immediately follow up with Dash Ragavan, play Dash Shadow, and buy Yorion is not really what Zach's looking for, I think. We did see a big Yorion turn in game 1, but with only 1 abundant growth and a lot less life to work with, I have to imagine Zach's not super optimistic. As here's Ragavan, go to combat, that's lethal. Let's move to game 3, says Zach Allen.
Okay, I'm starting to sweat. I'm starting to sweat, Drake, because this is the last game of the last
Right.
round, right
Right.
before the top 8, and
Mhm.
this is where this is what it boils down to. You know, it's been a long day. Who's going to come out ahead here? We've saw Zach Allen convincingly take down game 1. We've seen Luke Fuller convincingly take down game 2. So game 3, who do you predict is going to win?
Well, there's a commonality between those two results, Honorog, and it's the player on the play. Now, keep in mind, if you're going to take the role of the beatdown against the 4-color deck, you're going to be the aggressor. Being on the play matters a lot. Being able to deploy that Ragavan and hold up Counterspell or Drown in the Luck before Ren and 6 can come down and counter it. You do have Spell Pierce in these Shadow decks, and you do have Discard as well, so maybe you can sequence things a little differently, but no matter which way you slice it, being on the play matters a lot. And so Zach Allen being on the play here for Game 3 is huge.
Okay. I think I'm going to also agree with you. I think in the last game here that, Zach Allen with the 4-color deck will be favored. We'll go into the game as soon as we possibly can here. I also just think, just being able to deploy your mana faster, like you mentioned, this is not a matchup that is entirely about card advantage. Actually, I guess that was regarding the Azorius Hammer, the matchup. Never mind. But in this matchup too, you could sort of see there are some similar elements where it's mostly about having the right card at the right time and then snowballing and then using your card advantage to win. But first, we need to stabilize. We need to breathe and see both players deploying turn 1 land. See if there's a 1-mana threat here from Luke's side.
So you hear a lot of discussion in Magic about what constitutes a fair or unfair deck, right? You talk about, who's the good guy doing it the right way and who's cheating on mana and all that kind of stuff, right? These are terms that are thrown around a lot. But no matter which definition you go with, because I do think there's a lot of argument to it, a big trait that is emblematic of fair decks is lining up your answers with their threats, your answers with their questions. And I think that is going to be a big part of the victory for either player in this matchup, as we see Zach fetching a Triumph on Instap. Here's that turn 1 Ragavan. Think about how much more potent that would be on the play. But despite that, also think about, once again, it's about knowing the context, knowing that, Ragavan, something can happen. I think we do see a Ren in hand for Zach Allen, and we do. And this is so big. This is exactly what being on the play buys Zach Allen. The ability to play Ren here, pick off Ragavan, instead of having to potentially have an answer an entire turn earlier.
Yeah, this is basically, I would be so surprised if that play alone did just not decide the game, right?
Exactly. Early turns decide a lot of games, even though it's not what kills you. The early sequencing matters so much when you're talking about how games played out, and especially matches that are high stakes between two very fair decks here, but both with elements that can snowball.
Yeah, quite phenomenal here. So we're going to see Soken's on the play here. Teferi going to be slammed down, and that just resolves. Okay. Zach Allen firmly in the driver's seat now. I think Teferi Time Raveler, one of your best. I mean, this curve has been quite phenomenal, actually, right? Turn 1.
Turn 1 Triumph taps, turn 2 Ren, turn 3 Teferi. I mean, that's the 4-color power, right? Here's turn 1 land, turn 2 Planeswalker, turn 3 Planeswalker. Sometimes there's an elemental involved, but this is what Zach's looking to do. This is the way you drew it up. Now, any threat that's not specifically Torok that Luke deploys can just be picked up. Now, you can dash a Ragavan or whatever. There's some exceptions. But for the most part, keeping Luke's threats off the table long enough for Zach to be able to set up with his mana and his more expensive cards, exactly what he's looking to do is here comes Ledger Shredder. Here's Bobble. That's going to trigger Connive. I like the basics from Luke a lot. Those basics, very underrated from those Commander sets. Little Rebecca Gway art, if I do remember correctly.
Oh, yeah. I love Rebecca's art. My favorite card, one of my favorite cards is just Predict, and the art on that card looks so great.
Very good.
That being said, I am kind of just a beta basics kind of player. I love me my basics. You are
another Bobble. We're going to look at your top card, too. I already know mine. That's an Abundant Growth.
Oh, Abundant Growth is actually kind of a decent draw, right?
I think so, especially given that he already has one in hand and is looking to set up for a Yorion turn in the future, right? Like that's going to make the Teferi plus Abundant Growth plus Yorion do that exact same sequence we saw in game 1, where Yorion comes down and flips the script entirely when it comes to tempo, when it comes to cards, when it comes to just all the resources. Yorion's going to solve all your problems. And that's the big difference between the two companions we see here. Zach's is a primary part of his game plan, whereas Luke's is something you grab when you're out of resources a lot of the time.
All right, Teferi going to bounce the Ledger Shredder, clear the board, keep things on pace here. I was going to say the other option is we could technically play the Abundant Growth, bounce the Abundant Growth if we're looking to divine this turn, but I like this as well. This is a lot more consistent of a play here. Red and 6 is going to come down, pick up the Misty Rainforest and put that into play, and suddenly, oh yeah, Zach's must be very happy with this positioning. I mean, Luke has still a lot of resources left in the tank. I see notably one copy of Expressive Iteration, which will be a big draw, but good positioning here for Zach.
And this Ragavan. Thoughtseize going to do a good job clearing the way for a dashed Ragavan. And then any card that comes off the top could potentially be played. I mean, we're at far enough down on the mana. The problem is Zach is, with 2 Planeswalkers now, just really well set up to begin to navigate this game to a spot where Yorion is going to do exactly what we saw in game 1. It's like a doom clock, right? Each turn ticks down. It's like Abundant Growth. Dong! Like, Teferi ticking up and down. It's just like, every turn, it's like that Yorion looms closer and closer to coming down and threatening to draw a lot of cards and block whatever you have going on. And here comes Thoughtseize. 2 Abundant Growths, Teferi, and Counterspell. Imagine that Counterspell's got to be the scariest thing going on there, but Teferi selected instead.
Okay. So that must indicate that there's going to be a dash Ragavan taking down the Teferi. Now at least we get to our interaction, or our ability to interact back. I mean, Counterspell is somewhat scary. I almost wonder if... So there's another thing to think about too, which is if Yorion is that big of a deal, possibly we're just supposed to hold on to the Thoughtseize until, Zach pays 3 mana to put Yorion into the hand. But that's where we get into layers. I mean, there's enough pressure in play where you probably just have to spew it on the spot here to make sure you can get... So the game doesn't completely snowball out of control.
Right.
But those are other things to consider as well, as Zach Allen's going to play another copy of Abundant Growth.
Yeah, it looks like another Abundant Growth. A couple cards in hand. Ephemerate among them. Teferi down. Looks like I like Zach's patient with these Abundant Growths. They seem like they're free. You should just kind of throw them out. But Zach being very particular about how much mana he's willing to tap every single turn. Here's Expressive Iteration. Thinking about counterspelling that one. Looks like he does not care. That one's going to happen. Oh, we're retapping. Nothing's happened. Going to go ahead and retap. Going to go ahead and Expressive Iterate. Looks like Thoughtseize Dragon Trade Channel. There's 2 good cards. I think you want both of those for sure.
Absolutely. And I see a copy of Ice-Fang Coatl in the hand here for Zach Allen. That is also a good card. So game in. I mean, it's pretty close. Thoughtseize going to put Luke down to 7.
I have to imagine Zach's going to go for, the counter spell here. That way he can keep his Ice-Fang and his Ephemerate, be patient with all that stuff. I like that play a lot. It seems like a lot of these cards should just be kind of meaningless, right? Because it's all kind of noise until the Yorion comes down for Zach, right? It's like, okay, I have all these cards, you're discarding me, okay, oh, woe is me. But then suddenly you play Yorion and you've drawn a whole new hand and you have a threat, right? So it seems like these early discards aren't just going to matter when you have your big spike of card advantage in the late game, but preserving that Ice-Fang Ephemerate in case things get a little dicey for you, I think is an incredibly heads-up play by Zach.
Yeah, for sure. For anybody who is just tuning in, my name is Anurag Das, and I'm here with Drake Sasser. We are covering the last round of the Swiss portion of the Modern 10K trial here in Lansing, Michigan. Thank you. Massive thank you to NRG and the NRG series for hosting this event here, as Zach Allen on 4-color Blink is tied 1-1 versus Luke Fuller, Grixis Death's Shadow. This is a nail-biter of a game. Winner will most likely make top 8 and have a chance at qualifying for the NRG Series Championship later in the year. Here comes an Ice-Fang Coatl against the Ledger Shredder. Birds versus snakes.
This is National Geographic. This isn't NRG. You tuned into the wrong channel.
It's actually funny, too, because Yorion is both a bird and a serpent, right? Isn't that true?
Oh, so, it's playing both teams. That way it never loses.
Yeah, which is quite peculiar, I suppose.
Expressive Iteration going to find Fury among the mix. I wonder if you're interested in that one. Zach says no. Scalding Tarn going to enter the battlefield. Looks like we have Misty that is known as well. Zach keeping those cards revealed for Luke. A nice courtesy. Also does help you, yourself track what your opponent knows. So maybe not entirely a gratuitous gesture, but nonetheless, you do get to see that there. That was why those were revealed. Prismatic Ending going to trigger Ledger Shredder's Connive. Land discarded is not going to grow, but it is going to get exiled by Prismatic Ending. Bolts, some Abundant Growth, and a pile of lands among the rest. Now, this Wren is just ticking up and up and up, potentially threatening the ultimate, and The ultimate would be really problematic between Expressive Iteration and Counterspell. I mean, I've been talking all game about how this Yorion is threatening to draw a ton of cards with all these abundant growths. Well, this Ren's also just applying pressure from an entirely different angle, ticking up on loyalty.
Yeah, this is somewhat terrifying from the Grixis side of things, I will say. Right, Ren at 6, Ren at 7. I mean, there's so many lands in the hand as well that you will constantly have gas in the tank. Wow,
There's
okay,
the
that's
Ragavan going after the Ren, I think, is very telltale to exactly, how much respect that Luke has for the ticking up Ren. It could be a huge problem.
yeah, I'm surprised that Zach actually did not block or cast a lightning bolt. Said, "Hey, look, the
Well, it's worth an extra
loyalty
card
on this
with Yorion.
planeswalker is disposable." So
You're spewing. It's an extra card for Yorion, which I think might be Zach's plan this turn, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
but the red emblem, that's so many. You get to draw so many cards off of it. I guess Yorion's also drawing cards. Okay, it all makes sense. And
nothing matters, Honorog. All that matters is drawing the most cards. Here's a dress down in response to Omnath. That's going to stop Omnath from doing a whole lot this turn, maybe. There is a Boseiju in Zach's hand. I wonder if he's interested in spewing that off. Looks like the answer is no. I'm going to go ahead and pass the turn. We can wait on drawing all these cards. No stress.
yeah, that's so interesting because if you Boseiju the dress down, technically you get to draw the card off Omnath and then potentially even like put Yorion into play. But I don't know if we have enough mana to both add the Yorion and put it into play. It looks like we have like 1, 2, 3, 4 lands plus 4. Actually, no, but with the Boseiju activation, that would be we need 1 more mana. So
Well, it looks like either way, with how low Luke's life total has gotten, this Omnath could just trigger once, right? And then Luke's just dead. Like the end, not trigger once. The third trigger could trigger once.
oh yeah,
And then Luke's just dead, right?
and with Ren and 6
with
in
the
play
known
too.
fetch land, Luke has to remove this Omnath, or I think he's just dead on board. And Ren is going to get taken care of by the Dragon's Rage Channeler. Thoughtseize is not going to help that equation at all. Casting it certainly isn't. But maybe if you need to find an answer, I'd probably tap differently. Maybe. Oh, no, deployed Ragavan. Does Luke? Maybe Luke's not worried about it? Oh, Zach's going to gain some life instead. I think he has a land anyway, but I don't know. It's just a very strange texture of this game where suddenly it's not about cards anymore. There's like a real life total race happening here.
Very interesting. I mean, we have the 2 fetch lands, and oh no, the Windswept Teeth must still be in the hand. Okay, all right, that makes sense. I was gonna say it looked like it was in play, but it's actually in the hand.
Oh, it's in the hand. Well, we knew the Windswept was in the hand. You just need to untap and play that one and keep your fetch around, right?
Right. I mean, otherwise, what could have happened was, oh yeah, because then you could just land double fetch, and that would have been game. So maybe Zach is just trying to carefully navigate around.
Oh, maybe the lightning bolt plus Ice-Fang's lethal. I don't know. Zach's gonna find it. We have a lightning bolt.
There's so many ways
hand.
to just cut the cookie, slice the pie, eat the pizza.
Yeah, like there's a copy of Teferi too that can pick up the Ledger Shredder, get some of the blockers out of the way. I don't know. You can do whatever you want. This is one of those situations where Zach's the 4-color deck. He's untapping with Omnath. The world is his oyster. He's at 1 million life. He has 1 million mana. It's just like, it's kind of one of those, it doesn't really matter in which order you cast your cards. You're probably still going to win this game, as Luke is very, very low on resources, and that Yorion that I've talked about being looming all game is still looming, as we're going to spend 3 of the mana from Omnath to deploy Teferi. This is going to clear the way for any kind of shenanigans with Force of Negation. 1 card drawn there, using some of the remaining mana to buy Yorion.
All right, don't attack. Blink and draw the cards. Take another turn. You got Zach as a blue-eyed mage.
Sorry, Zach's a changed man. He attacks these days. And the Dragon's Rage Channeler going to jump in front of the Ice-Fang Coatl. Very smart. Luke would have been just dead to the lightning bolt. Instead, Luke gets another turn after Zach draws approximately 4.2 million cards.
4.2 million is a very, very accurate guess there, I would say. You're flickering 3 abundant growths and the Omnath as well. Getting loyalty on Teferi too.
Yeah. This is kind of one of those, like I said, all roads lead to Rome. It doesn't really matter. Zach doesn't need to really even apply that much pressure. Zach, everything coming up Zach. We have Planeswalkers, we have Omnath, we have Yorion, we have a handful of cards. Luke's impressively efficient creatures like Dragon's Rage Channeler and Ragavan looking suddenly very, very small on this board state of many, many permanents. And Terminate, one of the big pickups. That's a nice one.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say the Dragon's Rage Channeler has
you
to...
cast Thoughtseize? Bolt
Okay.
you in response? Okay,
That's
well, that's it.
That's
Can't beat a lightning bolt ever, so we'll go ahead and pick him up. And Zach is going to advance to 7-1-1. And if, he gets a little bit lucky with these breakers, that'll be another repeat performance for top 8 for him as well. Zach and Jesse, teammates, winning the team event at the end of season 1, coming back at this event and finding themselves in top 8 once again. What an impressive showing from the two of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is going to be, it's going to be close. Again, the records for each of the players, like I mentioned, there were 12 players in contention for top 8 at X1-1 or better. So Zach Allen's going to have to hold tight and hope that breakers work out just well. That being said, now that Swiss is over, we will shortly have our top 8 contenders playing for that first place prize, which is going to be awesome. We're going to do